And joining me now from the White House is Kelly O'Donnell, our Chief Justice and National Affairs Correspondent, and also with us our Chief Capitol Hill Correspondent, Ryan Nobles. Kelly, I want to start with you. The president is tackling the blowback over the Epstein files in typical Trumpian fashion, but this time it's his followers who are the target. Is there any concern that this could backfire?
Well, the big question would be, what is the president, what does he stand to lose? And he's not going to be on the ballot again. Could it affect his Republican colleagues in the midterms? We'll see. But certainly there has been what appears to be a breach in what has been a remarkably enduring relationship between candidate and President Trump with his followers that have gone with him when he has taken other steps that they didn't necessarily like. But in this case, they really had strong feelings in a broad way. We have seen that from the office holder to the voter to the conservative influencer saying they want more. And the president choosing to lash out and sort of distance himself from his own followers. That is striking. It is different. We have not seen that before. And how enduring it will be is another question. Yeah. Will he kind of mend that in the days to come?
Yeah, and Kelly, could there be any real political consequences to ticking off his base, essentially?
Well, that is going to be a test because he would not be on the midterm ballot. And typically when Trump is on the ballot, that's when his broadest, most fervent voters turn out. So is there a cost there? In the short run, there does seem to be a sense of disillusionment among some in his base who voiced that they expected that he would somehow be different, that he would make a promise and keep a promise. The administration will quickly point out many areas where on policy they have done that. And the president's frustrations come through where he's pointed out that Epstein is now deceased. The case is over in his view, and that it is old news in effect. But the president has used the tactics he has often harnessed against his adversaries. And the unique thing today is sort of directing them at his own followers and supporters.
And Kelly, I know you were at the Attorney General's press conference yesterday. The president has largely stood behind Bondi, but he has seemed to set her up to take the blame if this just doesn't go away. So how firm is his support of Bondi?
Well, he does say that he believes she's been doing a good job, and his support remains strong at this moment based on the different ways we've tried to assess that. You're right that he has certainly pushed the responsibility onto her shoulders at the Department of Justice. I had reporting today that she was due to attend this White House event for an issue that means a lot to her, dealing with fentanyl and increasing the penalties associated with fentanyl. In the end, I'm told that she had a schedule issue and was not able to attend. That may be what it is on its face, or perhaps she just wanted to stay out of the glare today.
Interesting that she was not at that event. Kelly O'Donnell live for us outside the White House. Kelly, thank you. I want to turn now to Ryan Nobles on the Hill. Ryan, Speaker Johnson appeared to call for the files to be released, though he's walking that back a bit. Are congressional Republicans in a tough position here, walking the line between appealing to their base versus maintaining their support for President Trump?
I wouldn't say all congressional Republicans are, Gabe, because there is a significant block of congressional Republicans that just want the files out there, regardless of what the White House wants right now. But Speaker Johnson is definitely in a tight spot. He very rarely ever tracks away from President Trump and his message. And he found himself in a position yesterday after this interview with Benny Johnson where they were saying two different things. He tried to clarify today to make the argument that they are on the same page. This is what he had to say.
I have been misquoted and misrepresented on all of that. Go watch the interview I did with Benny Johnson. I'm very clear. I mean, we're for transparency. I'm saying the same thing.
Outside of stanchions.
I mean, you need to have all of the credible information released for the American people to make their decision. We trust the American people, and I know the president does as well.
And so I think the distinction right now that the speaker's trying to make, that the president is trying to make, is this new kind of definition of what they call credible information. Credible, I think, in many ways is in the eyes of the beholder. Those who have been asking for these Epstein files to be released for some time just want everything out there and want the ability to decide for themselves what is credible. That's part of why these files haven't been released, because the Department of Justice doesn't just do that, just release a bunch of files that could then erroneously blame people for something that they're not guilty of. So this is the divide right now, and it's clear at this point that base isn't satisfied with what the White House is selling.
Well, Ryan, I asked Kelly if there could be any political consequences for the White House in all this, but on your beat, could there be political consequences in the midterms for some lawmakers running in MAGA-heavy districts who don't call for the release of these files?
I think at the very least, Gabe, it puts them in a very difficult position, right? Because there's no doubt that in these very distinctly red districts that President Trump's loyalty, the loyalty to President Trump is usually unwavering, and you don't ever want to be outside of a box that Donald Trump is in. But this Epstein controversy is its own animal. There are many people that came into the MAGA movement because of their concerns around the Epstein scandal. So it certainly complicates the issue. But what you're seeing many of these House Republicans in particular attempt to do is try and be both things, say that they still support the president. It's not a problem that they have with the president, but they are upset with the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, and the Department of Justice for not moving forward. I think that's the line you're going to see them continue to walk. And I think probably Republican leadership right now are just hoping that, like many of the MAGA rule controversies, that this is something that goes away quickly, because oftentimes these scandals pop up and then they're gone quicker than they could even possibly run their course.
And Ryan, as we just heard from Hakeem Jeffries, Democrats are trying to seize on this. So why do you think that they think that this is a winning issue?
Well, because there's nothing like the enemy of your friend, the enemy of your enemy becoming your friend, I guess is a good way to put it. This is something that Democrats were not talking about 2 weeks ago. I cannot remember the last time a Democrat just randomly brought up the issue of Jeffrey Epstein. But the fact that it's created this fissure within the Republican Party opens up a line of attack for them. And it's now become something where almost every time they're talking about an issue, it's like subject, verb, Epstein, because they want this to continue to be an issue that is talked about in the political discourse. They understand how this undermines Trump's support with his most loyal group of followers. It's not necessarily that they're trying to win over the Epstein conspiracy theorists. What they want to do is encourage them to stay home because they're frustrated that the political process is letting them down once again.
And it's not often that they get to talk about so much division in the MAGA movement. Absolutely right. Ryan Noble is live for us on the Hill. Ryan, thank you.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.